Hello, and welcome to the webinar series on the Good Practice Database. It's nice to have all of you here today to join us on this very interesting topic to kick off the series. Today, we will be focusing specifically on horizontal integration and how countries can follow a multi-sectoral approach for achieving their NDC targets. My name is Allison Toll. I'm a program specialist with the NDC support program at the United Nations Development Program. And I will be the moderator for this first session. But I'm really going to hand it over very quickly to our two distinguished guests so that they can share information with you on what their process and experiences have been. And sorry about that. Let me just move through this. There we go. Just to start off and give you a little bit of information about what will be taking place today. The webinar will last for a total of 60 minutes, so for an hour. We're starting off with just this very short welcome and housekeeping. Then I'll give you a brief introduction to what the Good Practice Database is. Then we will have our two presentations from country examples. We will be looking specifically at a country example from Peru, which is called Paving the Way for Success, a comprehensive participatory process for NDC implementation in Peru. And then we'll move across the globe over to Senegal, where we will be looking specifically at the case study titled Harmonizing and Managing Inter-Sectorality, the Elaboration of Environment and Sustainable Development Sectoral Strategies. We will end both presentations with an open question and answer session. So I will ask you to hold your questions until the very end. And then we'll be looking forward to the next in the series of webinars that we will be having focusing on the Good Practice Database. So just to go over a couple of small things in case this webinar software is new to you. We're currently using the Zoom software. If you are experiencing any questions or technical difficulties, we suggest that you go down to the bottom of your screen to the question and answer panel, and you can go ahead and enter any question that you may have right there. And we have a number of colleagues that are helping in the background to be able to respond to any questions you may have or any difficulties that you may have. Also, just to let you know, there is a recording of this webinar, which includes all of the presentations and all of the audio, and it will be made available directly after the webinar. So if in fact you miss anything, or if you would like to share it with other colleagues, do not worry, it will be available for your use. So just to give a little bit of an overview on where these case studies sit and what's prompted this webinar series, I'd like to tell you about the Good Practice Database. The Good Practice Database serves as a central hub for good practices, of course, that's what it's called. It's case studies on learning and leadership for climate action. It's part of a database that is very easily searchable. So the case studies that are included there on climate action that's being effectively designed and implemented, good practices and experiences of various countries overcoming obstacles or challenges, and exactly how they overcame these obstacles and challenges. And also includes some information on how these experiences or these actions can be replicable in your own home country. The Good Practice Database is a sum of various parts. It was established by the Partnership on Transparency in the Paris Agreement, the NDC Support Cluster, the UNDP NDC Support Program, the SEDDS Global Partnership, and the NDC Partnership. We all came together and saw that we were doing different case studies separately and thought, why not duplicate efforts, but put these all in one place where it's highly searchable and people can find access to it through any of our websites. On the Good Practice Database, you can find over 200 case studies from across the globe, and these include things such as sectoral level actions, various themes, various implementation stages. We also offer case studies in English, French, and Spanish, and we're in the process of trying to expand the French and Spanish offerings at this point. There also are highly searchable, as I've said a couple times, because I think that this is the most important part and one of the best features of the good practice database is you can start out by just looking at one country that you're interested in learning more about, or you can go to a region and look at what you're looking for. You can go to various action areas. So it could be something on developing a roadmap or an implementation plan for your NDC, or you can go to different sectors or themes. Perhaps you want more information on transport, or you want more information on energy. You can go ahead and search by those sub-functions, which makes it very helpful, I think, to really find something specific to what you're looking for, but then also helpful because it gives you different ideas of what else is out there that perhaps you didn't even think about. So that gives you just a little bit of the background, but just to say a little bit more about the case studies themselves and who they're developed by. Although it is a large group of organizations that came together to put this out and to make it public, the case studies that are in the database are developed by people that go far beyond just LEDS-GP, PATPA, UNDP, and the LEDS Global Partnership. We have up to 55 new case studies that are currently being developed by our colleagues at Adelphi, who are also supporting this webinar series. New Climate Institute, Libellula, which is a think tank based in Peru, the Energy and Resources Institute, and the Center de Cebu Ecológica. That was horrible pronunciation. I hope I made a couple people laugh. I will, going forward, refer to them as CSE, which is based in Senegal. And they're also on the line right now supporting us with this webinar and making sure that we can get as much information as possible from this very, very good case study that will be presented today. So that's all about the good practice database. And before I take up any more of your time, I'd actually like to take this opportunity to invite one of our distinguished guests to come and give the country example from Peru, which is Paving the Way for Success, a comprehensive participatory process for NDC implementation in Peru. Today we have with us Alexis Echeverria, who is an NDC process specialist at the Ministry of Environment in Peru. Alexis is a coordinator of processes for the NDC in the Ministry of Environment of Peru. He is a social communicator and educator with diplomas as a specialist in strategic planning, capacity building, and knowledge management for climate change and public management projects. He has experience working on climate change planning and management projects with local and international NGOs, and was part of the official delegation of Peru at COP21 in Paris. Alexis has written several papers on processes for the INDC and the NDC of Peru, also for the systematization of projects and actions at local, regional, and national levels. He was also part of the technical team for the elaboration of Gender and Climate Change Action Plan of Peru. Alexis carries out the participatory process called Let's Talk About NDCs since its creation at the beginning of 2018. And he is now here with us today to share more of his experiences and good practices that we can hopefully take forward and work on implementing in our home countries. Alexis, if you want to go ahead and take over the screen, I invite you to do so now.
Thank you very much, Alison. I am ready to do my presentation, so I will share. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Perfect. Yeah, if you just want to make it big, that's perfect.
Yeah, okay, I will. Okay, that's okay now. Okay, I can start, yeah?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you everyone. So in these 15 minutes, I will introduce the experience in Peru to determine the adaptation and mitigation action of NDC, working with 14 ministry and the National Planning Center of almost 2 years between 2017 and 2018. My presentation has 5 segments that will explain the context and the main milestone in the last 5 years. Also, the organization of the participatory process to have 153 adaptation and mitigation action at a second important moment in the recent history in climate change in Peru. Now, you can see the historical timeline of interior management of in the face of climate change. So this timeline is part of the final report of the multi-sectoral working group for the NDC, and in December 2018. I will focus in three important moments in the last 5 years in Peru on the climate change subject. As you can see in the slide, there are two squares in blue. The first is referred to creation of the multi-sectoral commission for the NDC, which were present at the COP21 in Paris, determining mitigation action, and in the case of the adaptation, 5 thematic areas without specific actions. This is the first effort of the country to present specific action, especially in mitigation. So for Paris, we present some action in mitigation, but not really in adaptation, just the thematic areas. After the Paris Agreement, and once this commitment was ratified, the government created a multi-sectoral working group temporarily to refine and determine roadmaps with official information and the approval to the different government institutions. It is around this second milestone that I will tell you in the next slide. However, it is important to see the rectangle behind this second milestone, because as part of its function, this group creates a participatory process model. Let's talk about NDC to involve the region and the stakeholder in the private sector, the indigenous people, academia, civil society, and international cooperation. At the same time, the multi-sectoral working group, another complementary process, progress. So last year in April, climate change framework law was approved. It is expected by the second semester of this year, there will be the regulation of this law. For us, as a government, it is very important to explain the historic timeline about climate change, because they are not only the effort of the government, also to have this result now, the civil society and international cooperation have a relevant role supporting and promoting the determination of action and also involving stakeholders. Finally, for this slide, it is important to know that the work carried out by the multi-sectoral working group is an effort made by the national government. It is from this year, 2019, that we will have begun a process of reviewing this roadmap, including the action and focus of the region of Peru, mainly to identify new action or initiatives that ensure the goal of 30% reduction or even our ambition. By the end of 2020, we expect to have adaptation and mitigation action that represent the view of entire country with the multi-sectoral, multi-level, and multi-actor approach. This is part of the context that I want to tell you, but also this experience in a horizontal articulation process. So that's a context of climate change in Peru. As I told you before, for almost 2 years, each month, the government institution met to articulate and coordinate action to determine the adaptation and mitigation action for the NDC. During this time, the Environment Ministry has a role of technical secretary, both in leadership and in the provision of resources, so that each sector can determine its sectoral roadmaps with adaptation and mitigation actions. On the other hand, a stakeholder-involved strategy was developed to show the progress and relevance of this multi-sectoral level and multi-actor process. Also on our website, you can find the final report of this group and payer of each sector with the action, challenge, and links to sectoral goals. This last part is very important because to involve a stakeholder, our speech is not focused in the climate change as a main subject, but it's an instrument that helps to develop goals of the country from its government institutions. Now you can see in the slide some mandates and also results that we have during this process for 22 months. You can see here an important input was that deadline for the economic evaluation of current and upcoming NDC. In addition to creating and approving the model of participation involving the key actors to implement the NDC. Well, now, just as information to share, here you can see the thematic areas of adaptation with 91 actions in adaptation, and in mitigation sector with 62 actions of NDCs. Now, I will tell you about dialoguemos sobre las NDCs, which in English, let's talk about NDC, multi-sectoral, multi-level, and multi-actor participatory process. Regarding the participatory process model for NDC, it is important to know the construction of the model was carried out in the participatory manner with no state actors such as private sector, civil society, and academia. Likewise, this model proposed formats for dialogue space that always seek alliance and agreements and not only remain in a conversation. That's the difference with the other kind of space that we create here in Peru or in other countries too. Finally, after a year of initiating this process, government and non-state institutions use this platform to coordinate and articulate action to implement enable conditions for the action of the NDC. So that model is not just for the Environment Ministry, it's also for all the institutions of the governmental, but also for the stakeholders like private sector, civil society, and the others also. And they can use and just coordinate with us to be clear, to have alliance of maybe sometimes some agreements about climate change or the action of adaptation and mitigation. Then, here you can see the vision of Peruvian government now. No? After this experience for 2 years, we can finally we can see our vision in 2 terms: institutional, with a framework law on climate change and its regulation. We hope finish this process in this year. And the other term we have for action the NDC. This implies 3 challenges, no, around our participatory process dialoguemos. First, we have a work to do to continue with the sectors, with the national sector, and create a high-level commission on climate change. Second, we have a multi-level implementation articulating work with regional and local government. And finally, is a multi-sectoral stakeholder involved, encourage the involvement and invest of the private sector, the participation of indigenous people, civil society, and the other actors I told you as international cooperation. So after these two years, now we have another new cycle on integral management of climate change to 2019, 2021. The framework law on climate change and NDC mark a before and after in integral management of climate change. A new management cycle oriented for these three principal characteristics that I told you a lot in this presentation, but also it is focused in the implementation of the NDC. MINAM, now with this law, have a role of national authority on climate change to achieve this goal. Finally, main challenge for the implementation of the NDC. And here you can see 6 main challenges. First, consolidate the national debate on NDC process. So it is important not just work with the sectoral or national institution, also go to the region, to the local government to discuss and try to keep another action or initiative that they have and work inside. Second, achieve the implementation of the NDC permanently. And that's very important because, as you can see in my second slide, we create in the last 5 years, we create 2 commissions, but they are not permanent. It's just for a moment to create or to propose the NDC. But now, with a new framework law on climate change, we will create a high-level commission on climate change. And also, it is very important in this commission because we will have a representative of the region government. The next is identify financing for the institutional specification for the sustainability of the action. That's very important. If without money we can implement NDC. The other is involve the private sector. We will create a process with them because most of the action in mitigation need private sector to work, to run, then indigenous people, civil society, academia, and international cooperation. It's a very big role that they have here in Peru about international cooperation. Finally, facilitate the adaptation mitigation action, identify and define by the government sector within the framework of the new working group. To be incorporated in the planning, budgeting, and invest instruments. So this is a big challenge that we have, but we think it is very important for us, first, work not just with the national sectors, also go to the regional and local. Second, involve the other key actors, who work for a long time and they have all the experience to help the government. And finally, it is very important have a permanent relation with the Ministry of Finance in each country. Yeah? It's very important for us have 3 key in our mind to work and to implementation of the NDC. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Great, Alexis. Thank you so much for that overview of the experience in Peru. I think it was interesting to see that horizontal integration can mean so many different things. It's not just about going across sectors and across ministries, but rather it's the opportunity to go above and beyond, like you said, with the private sector, with indigenous people, civil society, to really reach this whole of society approach that I think is we're all finding is extremely important in really making the NDC real. So thank you very much for that. I see that there are a number of questions coming in, and we really appreciate those, and we look forward to answering them after our second presentation. And so with that, excuse me as I get through the presentation here, I would like to go ahead and introduce our next speaker here in the webinar. Mava Ndiaye is the Assistant Director and Head of the Environmental Watch Division of the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development in Senegal. Mr. Ndiaye has 20 years of professional experience in policy development, strategic planning, and capacity building, including 3 years as a member of ministerial cabinets and 11 years in the planning department in Senegal. He earned his master's in philosophy from Cheikh Anta Diop University in Senegal and post-professional diplomas in social work and diplomatic education, including specific training in participatory planning, community development, and strategic operational planning from the Center of Diplomatics and Strategics of Paris. Wow, my French is non-existent. And the National School of Specialized Social Workers in Senegal. Since 2010, he has acquired a strong expertise in the field of integrating climate change into sectoral policies. He coordinates the process of developing environment and sustainable development sectoral strategies for the integration of environment and climate issues into sectoral policies in Senegal. He currently serves as the Assistant Director and Head of the Environmental Watch Division, as I mentioned, of Senegal's Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. So with that, I would like to invite Mava to take over the screen and go ahead with your presentation. Thank you very much, Mava. Oh. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Great.
Good afternoon. My name is Mava Ndiaye. I am the Assistant Director of and Head of the Environmental Watch Division, with Senegalese Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experiences with you. Today, I will be presenting on the elaboration of environmental and sustainable development strategies in Senegal as part of the GIZ Good Practices in Climate Change database. Here is an overview of the presentation. We will talk throughout project context, objectives, and timeline, and then finish with some success factors and key lessons learned. We will also briefly talk about some challenges and replicability factors. The presentation will be pretty high level, so I welcome Keishan to talk throughout the project in more detail. First, some context for the project. Because of its location and development status, Senegal is a country that is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. As a result of climate change, Senegal is expected to experience increases in temperature, decrease in rainfall, sea level rise, and increased incidence of and magnitude of extreme events like flooding, droughts, and extreme heat, all of which is expected to cause significant impact, particularly in the agriculture, fisheries, and health sectors. To address these vulnerabilities, Senegal has taken important steps to integrate climate change into national level policies, most notably with the adoption of our NAPA, National Adaptation Program of Action, in 2006, and more recently with the INDC in 2015, and the NDC, which is currently in the process of being implemented. These policies and plans outline strategies and activities to address climate change at the national level. But to date, climate change has not been effectively mainstreamed or operationalized in sector level planning and policy. It's this gap that the SEDDS project looks to address. With funding from the Luxembourg Cooperation Agency, the Environment and Sustainable Development Sectoral Strategies Project, or SEDDS, focus on mainstreaming climate change into sector-specific policies. 2 phases were planned. Phase 1 was project land strategy development and planning, and it was undertaken from 2017 to 2019. Phase 2 is upcoming and will focus on strategy implementation and mainstreaming from now until 2022. Initially, the project will focus on the health and vocational training sector, which the hopes of building specific best practices, frameworks, and lessons learned for replicating the process in other sectors in Senegal. This project had 3 main objectives. First, the project sought to establish a baseline understanding for the level of climate change integration in current national sectoral policies. Following this, the project seeks to define sector-specific priorities for climate change and the environment. Finally, leveraging these priorities and baselines, the project will work to develop and promote effective planning tools for mainstreaming climate change into sectoral ministries. Phase 1, which again took place from 2017 to 2019, focused on developing the strategy for how the sectors were going to approach mainstreaming climate change into their specific policies and plans. To do this, a number of activities were undertaken. First, the project conducted extensive capacity building and training for environmental experts in Senegal on how to approach integrating climate change into sectoral plans. Second, the project established a framework for elaborating SEDDS in line with sectoral specific priorities. Following this, the health and vocational training sectors developed roadmaps and actions plan outlining specific strategies and activities. It was planning the undertaking for mainstreaming climate change into their plans. With the draft plan together, the project appointed focal points for managing and coordinating the SEDDS work in the individual ministries and established regular meetings to discuss progress and new developments. Finally, at the end of phase 1, both the health and vocational training sectors adopt the strategic plans which they will be implementing in phase 2. As I said, phase 2 is expected to be completed in 2022, but here are a few of the specific objectives that the health and vocational training sectors have planned as part of their roadmaps. The health sector first will develop a preventive approach based on the environmental determinants of health. Next, it will improve the resilience of the system to climate change. And finally, the plan will support universal access to sustainable well-being in Senegal. For the vocational training sector, initially, they will work to ensure that training and craft production institutions adopt environmentally responsible practice. The second objective will be to use innovation and action research to promote equity and sustainability. Specific action steps for these objectives are still being finalized. By the end of the project, the following results are expected. First, the sector-specific policies and plans will better incorporate climate change into sector-specific policies. Initially, the health and vocational sectors, but the goal will be to leverage the initial results to replicate in other sectors. While the project focused mostly on the health and vocational sectors, stakeholders from other ministries were also involved in the project training and consultation, which has increased awareness in other sectors. The expectation is that this will continue to build as the actual policies from the health and vocational sectors form. This whole process, from engagement to lessons learned and sharing of finalized policies, will work to enhance inter-sectoral dialogue. This focus on inter-sectoral coordination and innovation sharing was one of the key reasons why this project was selected as the best practice in the first place. Finally, of course, by integrating climate change into the sectoral policies and plans, the goal is to enhance the sustainability of the production of goods and services in those sectors. Okay, I want to finish with some success factors, challenges, and lessons learned from phase 1 of the project. In engaging with the different sectors and ministries, we found there was a lot of hesitancy to change. In fact, institutions are averse to change due to their fear of losing status. So, a few lessons learned we found for addressing these barriers were to proactively involve stakeholders from the beginning and talking throughout, creating alignment between current priorities and climate change and environmental aspects to be added. And in this stakeholder engagement, we deliberately frame the dialogue as creating new opportunities rather than overcoming constraints, which made stakeholders much more comfortable approaching the suggested change. Both of these together are key for success. Following these two is obvious, but ensuring that the project has access to the right technical support, involvement of high-level decision makers, and effective dialogue takes proactive planning, and these elements should be included in project dialogue early on. As I said before, another key best practice from this project was focusing on enhancing intersectoral cooperation by engaging a variety of stakeholders at once and providing targeted communication and forums for innovation and knowledge exchange at all stages of the project, not just once the policies are complete. For replicability, it is necessary to establish a technical dialogue directly with the main stakeholders involved or affected. So, it is important to give priority to a sectoral approach where actors to be involved are selected based on sectoral priorities. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention. I look forward to responding to your questions and continuing this dialogue in the future. The link to the full case study is here, and the contact information for my health and my colleague, Gay, at the Centre de Suivi Écologique is also included. So feel free to reach out after the webinar. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mava, for that very great overview and introduction, and also for linking to the full case study. It's a good opportunity to just remind everyone that these case studies are in full in the Good Practice database, and you can get much more information than what was provided here today, and get more into the details. When listening to Mava's presentation, I was struck by the fact that there are a lot of similarities in terms of making sure, as you mentioned, Mava, that you have to get people involved from the very beginning. You need to make sure that the stakeholders across the board are involved from the beginning and not once the policy or the process has already been assigned or has been decided. But I thought it was also very interesting what you talked about with the capacity building and offering the training. So it's not always natural that people in the health sector necessarily would know everything about climate change, or people in the climate change would know everything about health, but they're so interrelated, and there's so many opportunities to improve on both aspects. So thank you so much for sharing that information. And I hope that it prompted a lot of questions among our participants, because now this is going into the last portion of our webinar, where we invite you who have been listening this whole time to prompt or to provide various questions to both of our experts on the line so that they can respond to you directly. Just a reminder that the questions can be typed into the question box on your screen. And then what happens is myself and my colleagues who are here in the background, we have access to those questions, and we will be feeding them to the two presenters so that they can respond. To begin with, we have a number of questions that came through for Alexis on the case of Peru. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a couple of those to Alexis for him to respond to. But in the meantime, please feel free to go ahead and type any of those questions that you have for Mava on the Senegal case into the question box as well. So to begin, Alexis, if you can just go ahead and unmute your microphone. You mentioned in the presentation that in Peru there's a climate change law, and our colleague Maha would like to know, for Peru, does the climate change law include any article relevant to the first NDC and the next NDC's ambition? Can you go ahead and answer that for us, Alexis?
Yeah, and also thank you so much. Thank you for your question. I will try to answer all of them. And also, if you have more questions, you can contact by the email that I have in my presentation. So for now, the law presents NDC as an instrument of integral management climate change, and also how actors, national actors, have to be involved. So this is very important because it's the first time that we have a law with this word about NDC, and also the role of the national actors. Alison?
Sorry about that. I was trying to send one of the questions off to Mava. My apologies for that. Thank you for giving that clear, very clear answer. The other question is coming from our colleague in Sierra Leone, who is asking, can you please provide me with the composition of the multi-sectoral working group in Peru and the terms of reference for the members? So maybe just giving an idea of the 13 different sectors, and then maybe you could even share the in full TORs bilaterally with our colleague.
About this question, the multi-sectoral working group has been finished last year, but in our website of the Environment Ministry, you can find the members and also all the information about them. There are 14, 13 are ministers, and the other one is planification institute who work, and it will be the same for the new commission that we will create in the second semester of the year.
Great, thank you very much. I know that we've had a lot of questions on the Peru's approach to the multi-sectoral working group. So it's great that there's access to more information there. I'm going to ask one more question to you, Alexis, and then maybe go to Mava to ask a question from his side, just to change it up a little bit. So our colleague Binu says, good presentation on the process from Peru. And this is looking back a little bit, but I think it's important, especially with the updates and the cycle, for us to revisit. The colleague asks, was there a prioritization process? Or sorry, a prioritization of climate action for the NDC? If so, how was this done in Peru?
Yeah, I will try to answer two questions because there are one like this and the other about LULUCF sector 2. So we prioritize 5 thematic areas in adaptation action. And for mitigation, we prioritize 5 sectors. So with this thematic area and sector, we create and determine 153 actions. About LULUCF sector, in our NDC, we have 8 mitigation actions. So all this information you can see also in the website. We have a lot of information, and we have also the final report of the working group, like 900 page. So it's big, but it is very interesting to see all of these action with technical information and also with key actors and some mechanisms or space to work and to apply the actions.
Great, thank you very much. And now I would like to actually invite Mava to come back in and provide us perhaps a little bit of information. We have a question from our participant here that says, very clear presentation from Senegal. How were gender aspects considered and participation from women facilitated in the process? Is that something that you could answer, Mava, or maybe one of your colleagues could jump in with too?
Thank you. The question is how gender aspects are considered. The process has well-integrated gender aspect. The set gender focal point regularly participated in the workshop that were organized as part of the development of SEDDS. All the focal points were women's. Sectorial policies also has gender cells and gender indicators, and the SEDDS have taken consideration for these indicators in this elaboration.
Thank you. Thank you. That was very clear. And I, as a gender advocate, I'm very excited to see that there were indicators and that this was very, very highly considered. Thank you for that feedback. Now I'm going to, we have a couple of questions that are presented to both of you. And I thought that it might be interesting for both of you to give us a view into how the process is the same or different in Peru and Senegal. The question is quite general, but I think it's a topic that's on all of our minds right now. But maybe Alexis, if you can answer first, and then we'll have Mava answer. The question from our colleague is, do you think about updating your first NDC? And I'll just add on to that, if you are planning an update, can you elaborate on how these horizontal ways of working together will help your updating of your NDC. Alexis?
Yes, Alison. So yeah, about this question, I can say first, we had 5 years ago, like this, a proposal of NDC. During the last 2 years, we work about NDC, but also with approach of the sectoral sectoral institution in national level in Peru. But this year and the next, we are focused on regional and local space to updating our NDC, because we need to create a vision, a national vision, not just from the city, from Lima, here in the capital. Also, we want to go to the regions and local spaces to keep this information about initiative and also action. So at the end of 2020, we will have another NDC with more initiative, and also we hope another action than to have our NDC to present of the National Union.
Great, thank you. We're excited to hear about that. Mava, can you go ahead and jump in on that answer, or on that question?
Yes, just a sec.
Thank you. Just to say it again, we're asking about if Senegal is planning to update the NDC, and if so, how the work that's been done under this project will help feed into the process of updating.
Okay. Currently, Senegal is finalizing its NDC based on the initial NDC, and the results from the SEDDS project were integrated into this process. The SEDDS process will certainly contribute to the implementation of the CDN in Senegal. Indeed, the SEDDS sectoral strategies are in line with CDN, which encourages the integration of climate change into sectoral policies.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that with us. My apologies, I'm in the background trying to share information as well. We have one question just about the possibility of sharing the copies of the presentations, and I just want to remind everyone that indeed we will share copies of the presentations and the full recording of the webinar after the session with everyone who attended. It will be up on the Partnership on Transparency in the Paris Agreement website. And we'll follow up with a thank you email for your attendance with a link to the presentations and the recordings. So also, in case you wanted to share it with any colleagues, that would be okay too. And then I'm going through these questions and trying to prioritize them before we run out of time, and just trying to make sure that our colleagues in the background can see them too. Maybe Mava, if I could ask you to come into, we have a question from a colleague that asks, wondering why the health and vocational training sectors were chosen. And if I can go ahead, and I think that you touched on it some, but it would be interesting to understand the reasoning behind it.
Okay, initially 4 departments were chosen, but these 2 departments, the health department and the vocational training, were the first to react positively. In addition, the Senegal-Luxembourg Indicative Cooperation Program had set up steering committees for its project. These committees provided an appropriate framework for dialogue, and therefore facilitates the process. fisheries and agriculture are indeed important sectors, but we had to start with sectors that are ready to try this experiment. Later, we plan to expand, to leverage, and see how to do the same with fishing and agriculture or another sector.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting and important to in our planning. I think we often think about, well, if this is the largest emitting sector, then why don't we tackle it first? And sometimes, like you mentioned, you have to enter where the entry points are ready. So I think it's a very good lesson to be learned. And it's also the opportunity maybe to perfect the systems and the processes before you get into the larger emitting sectors or the more complex sectors. So thank you for sharing that. We're getting towards the end of the webinar, and we have a question from one of our colleagues that I think is somewhat general, but it's a very, very important question and one that I think we battle with all the time. So I would like to hear feedback from our two experts on this. The question is, how are you able to achieve the proactive involvement of all stakeholders? And if you could just give 2 or 3 wins, so to speak, in terms of how you're able to achieve that. I think it's such an important skill and upper hand to be able to have. Maybe I'll go to Alexis first, and then we'll end with Mava.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I think it's very important because here in Peru, to create the model of the participatory process, we work also with the different stakeholders. We create a group of work for 6 months, and with them, with participants of the private sector, civil society, and also indigenous people, we create this model, and we introduce this model in the working group and also in the National Commission of Climate Change. They approve this this model, and it is why now all of the stakeholders want to use this platform to work, because it's simple and also it's organized to have alliance and also some agreements. About civil society, they are involved all the time. They are ready for it is important also create some big event for example, here in Lima, in Peru, we do the COP20. So before Paris, we had the big event of climate change here in Lima. So a lot of the organization prepare proposal and also work with the government. So with this base, we continue work until now.
Great, thank you for that comprehensive overview and ideas. Mava, over to you.
Okay. Yes, in engaging with the different sectors and ministries, we found there was a lot of hesitancy to change. In fact, institutions are averse to change due to their fee or losing status. So few lessons learned we found for addressing these barriers were to proactively involve stakeholders from the beginning, and talking about creating alignment between current policies and climate and environmental aspects to be added. And in this stakeholder engagement, we deliberately frame dialogue as creating new opportunities riser for overcoming constraints, which made stakeholders much more comfortable approaching the suggestions. Both of these together are key for success.
Great, thank you very much, Mava. I think it's great to end on success factors and what has provided Senegal the opportunity to be successful in this. I think that that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Just to acknowledge that we have a number of other questions, but we are going to try and close relatively on time. So perhaps we'll bundle these questions together and then share them with our presenters, and they can respond to them in text, and we'll go ahead and put that up on the screen, on the email that we send around afterwards. Otherwise, I would imagine also some of these questions will come up in our next webinar series. So if we don't get to them now, they will be coming in others. And this is just to remind everyone, as I said at the very beginning, this is part 1 of a full webinar series. There will be 4 webinars planned until the end of October. We are solidifying the speakers, but we have the topics already developed, as you can see, webinar 2, 3, and 4. But we'll go ahead and announce date and time and send invitations to all of you who have taken part in this webinar, and we hope that you will also take part in the future webinars. With this, I would like to take this opportunity to just thank our 2 presenters, Alexis and Mava, for sharing their experiences and their expertise. It was fantastic to hear from both of you, and I hope that the participants on the line were able to glean some lessons learned and some things that they can take forward. I'd also like to thank Adelphi and CSE, who are here supporting in the background. They've been instrumental in making sure that everything is running smooth, and we couldn't do it without them either. So with that, thank you, Alexa and Mava. Thank you, Adelphi and CSE, and thank you all participants who have been here listening in for this first as part of the webinar series. I wish all of you a good day, a good evening, a good night, wherever you may be, and we look forward to seeing you in future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.